interesting were that the examination of the adhesive stubs used to sample the bag revealed more than 5 particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue.
On Sunday, September 25th, 2016, Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife, Diane. Afterwards, they went back to their ranch home in Putnam County, where Diane's friend Danny Joe Carter was spending the weekend with them. At the end of the day, all three headed back to Atlanta in the McIver's SUV. Danny Joe was driving because Diane and Tex had been drinking wine. Diane was in the front passenger seat and Tex was in the back seat. When they got to downtown Atlanta on the connector, they hit traffic, so they took the Edgewood exit. As they got off the road, Tex was concerned about the neighborhood they were in, so he asked Diane to hand him his gun from the console. They continued driving up Piedmont Road, and somewhere between 12th and 14th Street, the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the front passenger seat and struck Diane. She died the next day at the hospital. Tex McIver says it was an accident, but prosecutors say it's murder. This is the trial of Tex McIver.
I figured if he wanted to tell me what happened to her, hell, I knew what happened to her. He shot her in the back. I said, you don't need to have one of these things for me because I'm doing the same thing for her that she would have done for me.
Did Diane McIver ever tell you what she wanted to do with the ranch when she died?
She did tell me that she wanted Austin to have the ranch.
He couldn't leave anything in his will regarding the ranch to Austin unless they changed how the ranch was owned, right? Because the ranch doesn't go through his estate.
Right.
Did you understand that to me, that Tex was leaving everything to Austin?
I did.
So the day before death, $1.7 million, Mr. McIver's net worth. The day after death, 5.9 or 6 million to 6.9 million.
He would have been a negative $5,000.
Correct. Correct. Debt is my biggest obstacle right now. Plan on hitting the lotto sometime this week. From Diane McIver to Tex McIver. Make sure you read Javier's job description. That is your next life chapter.
Firearm. If I just hold it in my hands like this, will it just go off?
No.
Sit down with it and hold it down here in my lap, will it just go off?
No.
If I handle it like this in any way, will it just go off?
No.
What will make this firearm go off?
Something would have to act on the trigger.
And when you say something has to act on the trigger, what do you mean?
I mean, the trigger has to be pulled rearward.
You don't know whether the weapon, this particular weapon was fired single action or double action, because there's no way to tell, is there, how a weapon was fired, correct?
That's correct.
If it's in single action, I think you said that if it's in single action, if you put it in your pocket, even keys, it may hit some keys in your pocket and go off. The trigger pull is so light, correct?
Right.
If you have the weapon and you don't know whether it's in single action or double action, it's extremely easy for that weapon to go off. Even things like keys in your pocket can unintentionally discharge the weapon, correct?
Right, so any force that exerts that amount of pressure, and our average was 2 1/4 pounds, so anything that can exert that amount of force can pull the trigger.
And there's no scientific test or test that you can do to tell us whether or not the trigger was intentionally or unintentionally pulled, correct?
No. Right.
We've heard of stuff called a hair trigger.
Yes.
You can modify the trigger pull on a weapon like this revolver.
Right, you could.
This one wasn't modified in any fashion.
I didn't see any evidence that it was.
The silver one, is that the one that you talked to Mr. Harvey about that said that's kind of the hollow points?
Yes, that would be the jacket hollow point.
Those are the ones that are designed when they go into something, they stop.
Right.
He asked you, they do maximum damage.
Right.
Okay. And they're faster.
Generally.
Is it true that they're designed to stop?
On Sunday, September 25th, 2016, Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife, Diane. Afterwards, they went back to their ranch home in Putnam County, where Diane's friend Danny Jo Carter was spending the weekend with them. At the end of the day, all three headed back to Atlanta in the McIver's SUV. Danny Jo was driving because Diane and Tex had been drinking wine. Diane was in the front passenger seat and Tex was in the back seat. When they got to downtown Atlanta on the connector, they hit traffic, so they took the Edgewood exit. As they got off the road, Tex was concerned about the neighborhood they were in, so he asked Diane to hand him his gun from the console. They continued driving up Piedmont Road, and somewhere between 12th and 14th Street, the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the front passenger seat and struck Diane. She died the next day at the hospital. Tex McIver says it was an accident, but prosecutors say it's murder. This is the trial of Tex McIver.
I figured if he wanted to tell me what happened to her, hell, I knew what happened to her. He shot her in the back. I said, you don't need to have one of these things for me because I'm doing the same thing for her that she would have done for me.
Did Diane McIver ever tell you what she wanted to do with the ranch when she died?
She did tell me that she wanted Austin to have the ranch.
He couldn't leave anything in his will regarding the ranch to Austin unless they changed how the ranch was owned, right? Because the ranch doesn't go through his estate.
Right. Did you understand that to mean that Tex was leaving everything to Austin?
I did.
So the day before death, $1.7 million, Mr. McIver's net worth. The day after death, 5.9 or 6 million to 6.9 million.
He would have been a negative $5,000.
Correct.
Pay for debt.
Correct. Debt is my biggest obstacle right now. Plan on hitting the lotto sometime this week. From Diane McIver to Tex McIver. Make sure you read Javier's job description. That is your next life chapter.
Firearm. If I just hold it in my hands like this, will it just go off?
No.
Sit down with it and hold it down here in my lap, will it just go off?
No.
If I handle it like this in any way, will it just go off?
No.
What will make this firearm go off?
Something would have to act on the trigger.
And when you say something has to act on the trigger, what do you mean?
I mean, the trigger has to be pulled rearward.
You don't know whether the weapon, this particular weapon was fired single action or double action, because there's no way to tell, is there, how a weapon was fired, correct?
That's correct.
If it's in single action, I think you said that if it's in single action, if you put it in your pocket, even keys, it may hit some keys in your pocket and go off. The trigger pull is so light, correct?
Right.
If you have the weapon and you don't know whether it's in single action or double action, it's extremely easy for that weapon to go off. Even things like keys in your pocket can unintentionally discharge the weapon, correct?
Right, so any force that exerts that amount of pressure, and our average was 2 1/4 pounds, so anything that can exert that amount of force can pull the trigger.
And there's no scientific test or test that you can do to tell us whether or not the trigger was intentionally or unintentionally pulled, correct?
No, right.
We've heard of stuff called a hair trigger.
Yes.
You can modify the trigger pull on a weapon like this revolver.
Right, you could.
This one wasn't modified in any fashion.
I didn't see any evidence that it was.
The silver one, is that the one that you talked to Mr. Harvey about that said that's kind of the hollow points?
Yes, that would be the jacket hollow point.
Those are the ones that are designed when they go into something, they stop.
Right.
He asked you, they do maximum damage.
Right.
Okay. And they're faster.
Generally.
Is it true that they're designed to stop?
Right, that's one of the characteristics.
Right. And so the other full metal jacket, the ones that are kind of brass or gold colored, they're designed to go through.
I wouldn't say they're specifically designed to go through, but that is one thing that they do.
Hypothetically, if you have like a plastic piece that's in the middle of the seat, that full metal jacketed one, the gold and brass one, it's not designed to hit the plastic and break apart. it's designed to kind of go through. Is that fair?
Right. I mean, all things being equal, the full metal jacket will penetrate more than the jacketed hollow point.
We're in an enclosed space, like a car, and you pull the trigger on that gun right there. You get the plume of the puff of smoke. Even though that photo is captured with a high-speed camera, my question to you is, with your naked eye, would you see like a puff of smoke?
Possibly. Yes, any time you discharge a firearm or anytime anything burns, there should be, smoke residue.
Mr. Dustin, can you explain to the jury what they are looking at as the video plays?
Correct. So what this is where we've created the 3D models of the seats based on the laser scan data, and then we have inserted the characters, and this was done under the direction of Mr. Michael Knox, as well as the trajectory rod was also captured in the laser scans, and so we had that all in relationship to the 3D model that we had created.
And when you say trajectory rod, is this the...
That's representing the trajectory rod, yes, sir.
The white, I guess, stick in the in State's Exhibit 288.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And all of your, I guess, images that's being depicted on the screen of the seats, is that created from your scans?
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
Now there are two positions. So if we stop it here.
Yes, sir.
So if you stop it, we have two positions for the weapon, again, controlled by or dictated by Mr. Knox. He wanted one with the weapon on his lap, and then the second position is if the weapon was close to his right hip.
When you say second position, is that what is
right there
depicted in this part of the video?
Yes, sir.
And is the only thing that's different in this second half of the video the position of the firearm?
That's correct, and the hand holding it.
So this is the bag that I tested for gunshot primer residue, and as you can see, there are some defects present in it. The results of my testing were that the examination of the adhesive stubs used to sample the bag revealed more than 5 particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue.
On Sunday, September 25th, 2016, Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife, Diane.
That's what happens when you're not paying attention.
No, I'm reading comments. I'm reading your comments here, and I wasn't paying attention to you there. Unbelievable day. State rested. Did they prove murder? Did they prove murder? That's the real question, because it's the end of the state's case. They put in all the evidence they believe they need to prove that Tex McIver intentionally pulled out that gun, shot and killed Diane. Got my legal dream team with me tonight. Latonia Hines, she's a prosecutor. Mo Ivory, she's a defense attorney. We got both sides for you here tonight. Want to see your comments, questions, opinions. Did they prove murder? Let's see. Let me just do a quick little. There was a moment in the opening statement from prosecutors, and I was like, wow, that's the exclamation point. That Tex McIver wanted to pay off the DA, right? And it was pretty clear from the opening statement what perception I had in my mind of how this moment was. Today, Jeff Dickerson testified about how the actual conversation went down. So was it an exclamation point or for the prosecution?
I don't think it's a wonk, wonk, wonk.
Why not?
I'm going to tell you why. Because even though you're saying like it needed to be this big like exclamation.
I just wanted what the prosecutors described in their opening statement.
But we got it. Because you've got to remember, Tex is arrogant and he is trying to dictate everything. And do you think he seriously came out and said, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z? He's an attorney. He knows how things go. Why would he even suggest it if he didn't mean it?
Beyond a reasonable doubt is what we're looking for here, and we just don't have that. And that was today's testimony from Jeff Dickerson just showed that. When asked the question, did he ever ask you to share a bonus with Tex, the DA, he had to say, no, he did not. All Jeff did today was give his opinion about what Tex's words when he said you can share this with others meant. And that is just Jeff Dickerson's opinion. It could have meant he could have shared it with other PR consultants, other media relations consultants to help out. He never did say, use this money to give some to Paul Howard so I don't have to go through a trial and I am not charged. And that's what it is.
But you're talking about the context of a conversation, and the context of the conversation is, yeah, I know Paul Howard. Oh, okay, and he happens to be the head DA of the office that would be prosecuting me. And then I think that you've got to look at that also. And so the context of the conversation becomes even more so powerful of the fact that he's talking about, well, you know, I'd shared the bonus with them. I mean, come on.
Sure, and the context of a conversation is important for sure. But
part of the context, though, is that this exchange takes place when Steve Maples, the attorney, leaves the room.
Sure.
So it's just one-on-one Tex
Correct.
and Jeff Dickerson.
Correct.
Sure.
Which is, why would you do that? But for the fact that you wanted to be a little bit more clandestine. This is the reason why you're doing this. Because you are trying to do an underhanded, under-the-table deal.
Sure, and it's cloudy, right? It's like so many of the issues, the witnesses, the points that were brought up by the prosecution. And cloudy doesn't get you a guilty verdict. And that's the big problem with the prosecution's case. When the prosecution rested today, I, like so many other people, did not feel confident that they put on a strong enough case to convict Tex McIver.
Here's the reality as a prosecutor. You don't go and say, I'm going to go and take this case because it is a slam dunk case. You have to go and look at the facts. And I think they have more than enough facts to be able to feel that he committed murder. And that's what they charged, and that's what they did.
All right, we've got some questions and comments here. Okay. There we go. Texas shady, says Marlene. Jeff is asking, will the defense call anyone? Well, they called one witness today who's talking about finances. I think they're going to probably call another expert about Tex's sleep disorder, the one that makes his fingers go like this.
They're going to have to call somebody, because here's the other thing. Much like Vinny's talking about with regard to the prosecution, talking about certain things in their opening statement, the defense made two, like, I would think is kind of a bit of a problem. I don't even think they should have brought up this whole sleep, like,
apnea.
It was like a compulsive arousal type of thing that they said, that all of a sudden he wakes up and then just like, oh, we, you know, pulled the trigger, or the trigger was already pulled. But I do think what they're going to have to do is have a gun expert. They're going to bring a gun expert on.
And
point the finger at the gun. Instead of putting the finger on the gun, point the finger at the gun.
It's going to become a products liability case.
Okay,
as opposed to a murder
that's what
case.
you're saying. Okay, and I think that they may very well do that. We still don't know how the judge is going to rule on the directed verdict, on the motion for directed verdict. So we have a lot of things to watch out for tomorrow. The defense just started today, just a glimmer of what's going to happen. And even the one witness that came up who was talking about the finances, the $700,000 worth of shares that Tex was not hurting. Tex was, again.
Remember what they said. It wasn't the fact about what his worth was. It was about his cash amount that he had available.
Sure, and his liquidity. Listen, let me tell you about the liquidity.
A lot of money, right?
Tex slept with his liquidity every night. Okay, he went to bed with her. He woke up with her. He visited her job. He went to the ranch with her on the weekends and enjoyed the liquidity for a long time.
Which he had to ask for everything.
And she never said no. And she didn't
put in conditions.
She did, and she had paperwork like she did with everybody else. But she was not.
Maybe he was tired of the conditions, because you can't have the conditions plus have a masseuse at the same time. Well, so that becomes a bit of a problem.
And you know what? There was no point at which Diane gave any signals that she was tired of being the cash mama.
Maybe she didn't have
she could have foreclosed on him. A multitude of things she could have done. And they were, in her own words, very happily married.
All right. Now, this is an interesting one. Sarah asking, if the jury can't have another choice other than murder, he will walk. And we were talking about this before.
Yeah,
let's start from the defense first. Will the defense, when it comes time to decide whether or not to be lesser included charges, which is murder or maybe something like manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, would the defense want lesser included charges for the murder?
Right now, I don't think so.
You think all or nothing?
I think all or nothing. For the defense right now, they're in a very strong position. I do not think that the prosecution has proven the case. This is the very reason why we saw them ask for a directed verdict today. I just do not think that they have to start thinking about, well, what if this, what if that? Right now, they're in a very comfortable place.
How about prosecutors? Do they want a lesser included charge here, do you think?
I think you do. And I think that the reason why is because kind of how we're doing all this discussion here, especially because it's not a slam dunk. And so you use those lesser includeds. If you're the defense, you don't want that. You want them to have to do the choice. But a lot of times jurors do what we call the splitting of the baby. And the more that they have the ability to do that, then the better. So the question is, what type of charges do you want them to split the baby on? Do you want them splitting the baby on this whole thing about the tampering? Or do you want them splitting the baby with regard to if you can't call it murder, do you want to be able to say manslaughter so that there's still somebody who's being held accountable?
I think that's a great tactic for the prosecution. I just don't think at this moment it's a tactic that the defense needs to use. Let's see what happens in the next couple of days when the defense presents its case, how the witnesses, react, what kind of what we get from it. But right now, I don't think it's necessary.
We've got some verdicts here from our 13th juror, which is you at home or wherever you are. Let's see. It keeps moving. So many comments, so I've got to jump on it here. Okay. We've got Angela says guilty. All he wanted was the money. Oldest story in the book. We've got, I tell you, it's moving so fast with all the comments, I can't even read it. Tex is slimy. Kathy says he's as slimy as a low-down snail. But does that make him guilty? That's the question.
But here's what I've been saying the whole time about this case with regard to the prosecution. They've got to make sure that the jurors understand the intent can happen very quickly. It's not about the fact that he got in the car with the idea of killing Diane. It's not even getting off on the exit with the idea of killing Diane. It's once he's got this gun that he realizes he has the opportunity. It's like going out there going hiking, right, with your spouse. And maybe you don't like your spouse, you're tired of him, they're looking over the cliff, and you just say, you know what, this is it. Boom, push them over. And so I think that's where you look at. And then the whole Black Lives Matter, you can't negate some of that stuff. Why are you putting that in there? And I think that, I've said this before, it reminds me of Charles Stewart, it's using your whole idea of people and racism and the thought process that people would understand that why you're feeling like that.
Sure.
Yeah, and bringing that in there. Because why would you even bring that in?
Sure.
Right?
And the defense, I think, will make the same argument like one of the participants, the 13th juror, just said a minute ago that, he's slimy, and he is, and we don't like Tex, and a lot of us don't, and we think that he, didn't maybe treat Diane great, and why was there a masseuse around, and all of those things that make him, not a great guy. But that does not make him a murderer.
Masseuse was in the boots.
Yeah, so it's important to remember that that will be also what the jurors are discussing. We don't like him. He is a slime ball. Did he cheat on his wife? Did he use up her money? Yes, he could have done all of those things, but did he murder her? That's a whole nother thing.
I've got more verdicts here.
That's what we're
Jeff
deciding.
says hung jury. Lori says innocent. State didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt. LaQuanda, not guilty. Marlene, guilty. Joey, guilty. Warren, guilty as woo. Roy, not guilty. Now this is interesting because from my history of covering cases through the years, right, for the last, whatever number of years, more than a decade and a half, viewers at home much more likely to say guilty in cases, like overwhelming, like big cases like Casey Anthony Jody Harris, it was 99-1, right? And in most cases, I would say it's like 80-90% at least say guilty, folks who follow this stuff online. This is much more evenly split. I don't know if I've ever seen one that's as evenly split as this one, which tells me, by going from you, the 13th juror, that things are not that good right now for prosecutors.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realize that there were 3 people in the car, right? And all 3 people in the car say the same thing about what happened. Well, I think that we don't necessarily put enough on that. Danny Jo, it was an accident. Diane herself, before she died, it was an accident. Tex, it was an accident. And so when you think about the concept of proving something beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to think about all of that test. What was it, 50 or 60 witnesses that the prosecution presented? And really, there was very little in all of those witnesses that we said, he is guilty. He is guilty. No, it made us go, I wonder. Oh, wow. Well, that was...
Here's the thing, but I get what you're saying. I truly do. But it's adding all of those things together.
Yes.
The 6 different stories that are being told by Tex.
Sure.
Not only that, it's an accident, she says initially. But then when she's dying there, does she want to see her husband?
No. But she still says it was an accident.
It's in the beginning. And not only that, his own reaction. I mean, when you see her at the hospital and they're getting her out, like, there's nothing that's been shown, to me at least, that there's been a loving relationship here that makes you feel like he was devastated about what he did. And I think that's strange, and I think that's
interesting. The one thing that struck me about Tex McIver in this whole case, and again, it's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but I never saw him taking responsibility for what he did.
Yep.
Which to me is kind of strange, right? You really love someone and you kill him. I've never heard anyone testify or heard from him those words like, I can't believe what I did. I can't believe I shot her. Oh my
You never hear that in his jailhouse interviews?
You don't hear that. You hear about him talking with his lawyers and doing all that sort of thing.
Well, I think that when you see Tex, when the SUV first pulls up to the hospital, he jumps out and he's running and he's trying. You know, we cannot dismiss that there was an action of urgency to get her.
It was not urgent because you didn't call 911.
Well, okay, but
you lived in Atlanta for as long as you have, and you take her to some place, as the doctor testified, they didn't have a trauma
unit. And Danny Jo did not call 911 either.
Well, she's also driving.
Correct.
I mean, she's also driving.
He was telling her to go to a hospital he was familiar with. So I think that you have to think about how the jurors are going to look at this information and assess it. So there may be as many that say, I don't think that he took responsibility or had a loving feeling towards her, especially when they pulled up. And there may be 6 others who say, well, you saw him jump out of the moving car when he got to the hospital. He was urgently trying to get her into the wheelchair. I mean, there's just a balance in the way people are going to view certain things.
And I agree with you, but I do believe that you're going to have your lesser included if you're the prosecution, because
I agree with that.
The way that we're talking about this here, it's kind of hard. And like I said, unless you can really have people understand when intent can possibly happen, when you're having this type of a malice type of murder, it becomes very hard for people to ascertain that it doesn't matter that he didn't get in the car with the purpose of doing it.
It could have happened on Edgewood Avenue.
It happened very quickly.
Let me go through a few things here. Did they prove a financial motive here?
I believe so.
No.
No?
No. Not at all. I mean, Tex was worth about $1.5 to $2 million on his own. He was doing fine. Yes, he had gotten a decrease in the law firm, but Tex was very comfortable. They were a comfortable married couple. There was at no time that Tex didn't have what he needed, that Diane wasn't willing to help him when she could. They had lavish parties, big old lavish wedding. I just do not think at that moment he was having...
Was there any motive, and again, it gets back to Tex's wandering eye, right? We talk about the masseuse with the boots, but also there was testimony about his ex, who was a neighbor of Diane's and a friend of Diane's, who he was talking about, hey, she's having trouble with her husband. Is that weaved into this whole thing? He wants the money and the freedom.
It is weaved into it, and what you can't forget, too, are some of Diane's own words about Tex and money and, like, are you going to be a gigolo, right? So she also has an idea of kind of about what their relationship is, that she's the one with the money and that he's the one, she's always having to support him. And maybe he's tired of being able to do that. And so maybe he was okay with the idea of getting money from her, but you can't get money from her and have your girl, too.
You can't, No, Diane was not going to stand for that.
And here, listen, there's never been any testimony that he was having an affair.
Right.
None.
There's no
So
testimony.
you can have as much conjecture about it as you want, and like, oh, I think he might. There is no testimony that will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was having an affair and that he was trying to get rid of Diane for financial reasons so he could go be with his mistress. It doesn't exist.
But there is enough testimony to make you think that there could have been a possibility there. And it would be different if you had nothing, right?
Yeah.
But you've got the masseuse who you're willing to pay money to give you a massage, but yet you're not going to pay for your wife's actress.
Same masseuse who traveled with them together. All three of them together on trips overseas, domestic trips. So this isn't even a masseuse that Diane didn't know. This masseuse was invited by both Diane and Tex to travel with them for, maybe they had back problems, maybe they just liked to get massages when they went away. So again, you have to take
nannies
that
also
information.
travel with couples.
Nannies travel all
Sometimes
the
nannies end up
True.
with that. All right, let's move on to another thing, which is
true.
He shot and killed her, right?
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Right.
The question was, it accidental or on purpose? There was a lot of testimony about how guns fire, and it's not it's not sending a man to the moon. You squeeze the trigger and the gun fires. Whether it's single action, double action, all that. Based on what's been put in front of this jury so far, is there a reasonable argument to be made that it was an accident? Which is what you need for reasonable doubt. It's got to be a reasonable argument. Has anything been put in front of this jury yet? There would be a reasonable explanation that the gun could have discharged accidentally.
I think that there has been evidence that there was a reasonable expectation that it could have been an accident, especially when they did the analysis of the gun with the 2 pounds versus the 12 pounds, and whether what would it take to trigger a gun that was already in the position for the. I can't remember exactly what the terminology was for the gun, but I think that they will be able to make a plausible case that the gun fired accidentally and that he had it and it was in his hand or in his lap, whichever one they're going to go with.
And again, they don't have to prove it.
No, they just have to.
A reasonable explanation for what happened is that it was an accident.
Exactly.
So they've got to prove it like this much. The prosecutors have to prove it this much.
Here's the question, though, and this is kind of what came out when they were doing voir dire, right? Any gun owner who is a responsible gun owner will tell you that they did not believe this story the way that he said it, right? So the question becomes is whether or not you truly believe that it was a bump, right? Because that was one of his stories. Other story was it was right behind Diane's back. You have all these different stories. Why not just tell the truth about what happened? And I don't think that he's ever told the truth about what truly happened.
I would agree with that, and I would also say that if there's going to be anything that's most problematic for the defense, it is overcoming that. It is overcoming whatever, however prosecution presents the closing argument, the biggest hump in the defense's closing argument is going to be overcoming the accidental firing of the gun. Because I think it is very true that a lot of gun owners are thinking to themselves, how is a man who has so much experience with guns and so many guns, because we saw the display, right? So many guns, would in a car have a small personal gun that would just go off. And that's a big challenge.
And I think the defense is going to have another issue. Tex has talked so much.
He talks too much.
All of this case. But if he doesn't get on the stand, I think the jury is wondering, why are you not getting on here? You can tell us better than anybody else what happened in that car. Was it cocked back? What happened? And I think because you see these jailhouse interviews that he was willing to give, even though he doesn't have to testify.
Well, the blanks that could be filled in, from my perspective, and I'll get this thing, is, the gun's in the bag, but the hammer's pulled back, and it doesn't look exactly like this. It's a shrouded hammer, but the hammer.
You just point that like a little bit.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Just
in case it's
exactly. From the defense perspective, they've got to argue that it was an accident and that the hammer was pulled back. So I think his testimony, the most important part of it would be, how did that gun
get cocked?
And you know what?
How did it happen? Did he do it that night because he was afraid of the Black Lives Matter?
Yes.
Or was he at the firing range and he left it that way? Did he lend the gun to somebody?
Yes.
That's an unanswered question.
Or they could just not answer those questions.
Here's the other thing too.
Right? That's a tactic
you're so
too.
Scared
just don't answer those questions.
You have it in this beautiful Publix bag. Although Publix is where shopping is a pleasure. I love Publix. But the other issue, but seriously, here's the other issue that you've got to get past. you're here and you're the protector of these two women, and that you're so afraid of, and it's like multiple things you're afraid of. Homeless people, Black Lives Matter, you're in a bad situation, bad area, you have all these things that you're frightened of, but here you are with this big gun to go and save everybody, but you're asleep, supposedly.
Yeah, you're so scared that you fell asleep. This is another big point, and Daryl Cohen, who's another dream teamer, makes this point a lot. Like, how would he? I mean, if you're going to shoot someone, you don't know what is in that seat. So how do you know that you would be able to shoot through the seat and hit your target? Because if you look here, you see all this metal stuff. Ultimately, we found out that it was a full metal jacket bullet, which can go through things. But is the prosecution going to argue that he knew he had a full metal jacket bullet?
I don't know.
Because it was hollow point. If it's hollow point, it's likely not going to go through all of this metal.
It's the intent of killing her. You think that and just shooting her, you think you're going to kill her. I think that they don't necessarily need to get into all of that.
Prosecution.
I think that you start going down the rabbit hole.
I think the defense is going to make a lot of that.
I think the defense could make the argument that with a gun owner so experienced who knows a lot about bullets, if he was intending, to do damage and kill her, he would have done it that way. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Although I don't think the defense is going to penetrate that.
The best thing that the
I don't
defense
think they need to.
Is take the case away from Tex. They can't explain or make him more humanized at this point. It's too late because he seems cold and everything. But you make it almost like a products liability case. It's all about the gun and the fact that this gun. There was a fault in the gun. There was something about the gun, and then it just went off, and it had nothing to do with Tex. It was a total accident.
Yeah, I think that's a very smart way to have the defense go. Although I don't think they need to go that way because the prosecution hasn't proven the case.
All right, the state has rested. Okay, defense started their case. They'll finish it this week. But as we stand right now, right here today, who is winning, prosecution or defense?
I say prosecution without a doubt, and the reason why is that they've proven without a doubt that Tex McIver is a liar, and that you can't trust anything that he says because everything that he says has a motive behind it, and the motive is saving himself, and at the same time being able to make sure he's able to access Diane's money. So I'm going to say with prosecution because they've been able to show, one, that he's a liar by his own words, by his own actions, and also by the gun evidence.
Mo?
Being a liar, he may, but that doesn't make him a killer. So the defense, a murderer. The defense...
He's a killer.
He's a killer. He is a killer. It doesn't make him a murderer.